In our recent tutorial videos, we've taken a look at AI agents at a high level, and we walked through building out our very first AI agent together. In today's video, I'm going to help you level up your skills even further, and we'll take a look at how to give your AI agents persistent storage across different sessions. In other words, we're going to create an AI agent that has working memory, and it can keep track of some data across different interactions that we have with it. So to get started, let me set the stage and show you what our demo today is going to do. So for this project, I've got this docs agent set up, and what it's going to do is it's going to answer questions about some documentation. In this case, we're going to use the Agentuity LLMs.txt file, which you can find by going to agentuity.com/LLMs.txt. So this is a pretty basic file. There's not too much content in here, but it's got enough information to where we can store things and see if we can set up an agent to ask questions about this and see just how to use all the different storage types that we have to offer. Now, before I dive into any more of the details, I do want to mention that we have a feature like this already on the agentuity.dev documentation website. So if we click on this little sparkle icon here, you'll see that we have this AI helper that can answer questions about Agentuity. So earlier today I asked, what is Agentuity? And it gave me a really helpful response and also linked to the related pages so you can do some more research. And of course you can go further, talking about things like the AI gateway, and it'll also have code examples for relevant content as well. So the AI-powered docs is something that I use all the time when I don't want to search through a bunch of reference documents. And just know that that already exists. So what we're going to build today is going to be a really simple version of this. And it'll help us get started with all the different storage types that we have to offer. And while we're here, I just want to make note of the fact that you can now open in ChatGPT or Claude or view our docs pages as Markdown in case you want to have a back and forth with your favorite chatbot and you don't want to use our AI docs. But I would really recommend you checking that out because it's pretty useful. But anyways, back to our project. So in the Agentuity web app, if you go to the infrastructure section, you'll see we have three different storage types. We have key value, vector, and object store. So those are the three storage types that we offer here at Agentuity, and they're all useful in their own ways. So we'll take a look at the example and actually test this out. And you should note that you can create storage with any three of these storage types, either through the UI, or you can do it programmatically. So for us, we're just going to go ahead and create an object storage or an object store. And once you do that, you'll see this nice pop-up, which gives you a quick reminder about what the three different storage types are and when you might want to use them. So let's walk through that real quick. So the first storage type is our key value store, and this is going to be used for quick access data because it allows for fast lookups. So for the most part, this might be the memory or the storage that you use just because it's really easy to set up and really easy to access. But in general, you might want to use it for configuration values, session tokens, and so on. We also offer a vector database, which is useful for similarity or semantic searches. So if you have some documentation like we do in our example, you can set up a vector database and we'll automatically create embeddings for you so that you can search, and not just search by keywords, but by semantic meaning. And last but not least, we have our object storage, which is best for storing things like images, PDFs, videos, other backups, and in general, just static content. And we offer a few different providers, so if you want to use Google or Azure, you can do that, but we'll go ahead and just use Agentuity and keep things in-house for today's tutorial. So once we set that up, we'll give our storage a new name, and the thing that we're going to use object storage for is just storing this entire LLMs.txt file. So we're going to store this documentation in a object storage bucket called docs. So we'll go ahead and create that storage, and you'll see that show up here in the UI, and you can take a look at the provider, the size of all the different objects that are in your bucket or your object storage. And now, when we're talking about our other storage options, let's talk about vector storage, which we're going to use to actually create chunks or different sections of this LLM's text file, which is going to allow us to create different sections, and it's going to allow us to send questions or queries and learn some information about Agentuity. So that's what we'll use vector storage for. And we also have this key value storage, which we're going to set up just to track queries that we're sending it. So with all that being said, let's take a look at the code that I created beforehand, and we'll see exactly how to use the SDK with these storage types. And afterwards, we'll look at a quick demo to see it all in action. Now, before we jump into the code, there's a few things that I want to mention really quickly, one of which is the fact that you'll want to deploy your agent if you're following along at home, or you're trying to set up your own example using all three of these storage types. So if you deploy your agent, it's going to allow you to actually use things like object storage, and it'll save you a lot of headaches. So just make sure that you deploy before you set everything up. And the last thing that I want to mention to just make the code a little bit easier to understand is just walking through how we're going to test everything. So in our dev mode, I want to be able to attach a file, in this case, the downloaded version of the llms.txt. And when we click run, I want to have my agent create different chunks from this, so different sections. And then we can send follow-up questions like, what is Agentuity? And we should be able to use those different vectors that we stored in the vector storage. So our agent will only use the relevant sections to answer questions, and we'll keep track of all of the different questions that we ask in kvstore. Okay, so with those things out of the way, now let's dive into the code. So for this project, I have a simple agent set up with the Vercel AI SDK and the bun runtime. And for starters, I'm just going to define some constants to keep track of the names that we have for our different storage types. So we just saw that we created that docs object storage bucket. But once we run through this code, you'll also see this vector storage called docs chunks being set up, and then the kvstore as well to track our query history. And then here's our welcome function, which dictates what we see in dev mode. But let's go down to the agent handler function, and we'll walk through all of that. So for starters, we're just going to grab the text content, and this is going to work for both file uploads and for follow-up searches that we do. So this is just a really easy way to set things up. And then to determine if we actually sent the llms.txt file and uploaded it in dev mode, we'll just do this very simple check to see if the text content has some of the things that our LLMs file has. And if that's the case, we'll go ahead and log that, and then convert that text to binary using UTF-8 encoding, which is going to allow us to preserve special characters like dashes and emojis. So that'll be a way for us to just make sure that our text is actually being read from our LLMs file. And from here, we'll generate a key for our object storage using a timestamp. And once we do that, we're ready to store our uploaded file into the object store. So we'll just use context.objectStore put, give it the name of our storage bucket, give it the key, and then send it the actual data. And this context object is actually how you'll access all three of the storage types. So it's not just used for logging, you can also work with all of the methods for the object store, so delete, put, get. And this also works for vector storage and all of those methods, which we'll see later on. And it also works for kvstore. So just want to mention that that's how you access all that. And you'll use the same object that you would for logging. But again, to get that uploaded file into our object storage, that's all it takes. But just know that if you want to follow along and you want to make things easy, just set up the object storage ahead of time like we did, and that way we'll be able to easily send the data to the bucket that we created. From there, we'll also be able to set up a public URL, which is actually how you can share any data that you send or upload to the object storage. So we'll create this public URL, again giving it the bucket name and the key. And you can also set the duration for when you want this URL to expire. By default, it's 1 hour, so we're just going to go ahead and stick with that. Once we do all that, we've got our object storage set up, and the uploaded documentation file will be stored in this docs bucket that we created in the UI. So now the next step is actually separating all that into different sections or chunks so that it's easier to search between them, and it's easier for our agent to answer questions about specific areas of that file. So if we look back in the code, you'll see that the next big task that we have is to separate the text into different sections. And we're going to do this in a really simple way by just looking for different headers that we know exist in the LLMs file. So we're just going to separate on the features, the about section, and the blog posts. So all three of those are the different sections that are in this LLMs file. And once we do this, we'll have separated chunks. So the rest of the code is just grabbing those chunks, creating the section titles, logging all that information for us. But then finally, we'll come down to this upsert method. And upsert is the way that you add or update vectors that you have stored within vector storage. So you'll see down here that we're using that upsert method, sending it the storage name, and these vector parameters. So these include the unique key that we have set up for each vector, and we're just separating it with a counter and the section. We'll also send it the actual documentation text, and this will automatically set up embeddings to actually power those semantic searches. After that, we'll just add some more metadata, and for this simple example, we're just going to give the full section or chunk data sent as the content part of this metadata. But again, from there, we're just going to call the upsert method, and that'll return an array of IDs, so we'll just go ahead and push that. and log it. And that's what we'll return for the part of our dev mode, or the part of our agent that actually takes in the LLM's attachment and creates different chunks. So once we run this in dev mode, we'll be able to see the public URL as well as the different IDs to make sure that all of this worked. Okay, so that's the object storage and the vector storage done. But if we actually want to search the documentation and keep track of our queries over time, we'll need a KV store. So let's go ahead and set that up back in our code. So in the event that we're not handling a file upload or an attachment, that means that we're handling queries in the dev mode UI. So we're just going to log that. And then we're going to use the vector search method to actually search for relevant content from all of the chunks that we created. So to do that, we're just going to send it the vector storage name, the actual text content, and then we can also set up a similarity threshold to only get back relevant content. So for how we're setting it up right now, we'll only return the results with 50% or higher similarity. And we can also limit the amount of searches that we get back as well. And once we do that, we're just going to go ahead and create a query history array. And we'll make sure to either grab data that's already in it or just create an empty array. And each time that we ask our agent a new question, we'll go ahead and push that query into the query history array with a timestamp, the results, whatever section or chunk was the top result, and the actual question that we asked as well. From there, we'll go ahead and set that history, or actually store it in our KV store. So we'll just call the set method, and we'll send it the storage name, and we'll also give it a key as well. So for us, we're just going to keep things simple and use this demo user queries key, and all of our queries, or all of the search history, is going to be stored within this key. Okay, so we're almost done, and the last couple things to do is building our context so that when we use an AI model to actually answer questions, it has the context it needs. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to send the top 2 relevant chunks or sections from our vector storage based on the search results. So we're just going to use the top 2 results and send all of that data, removing empty results. And that's going to be the context that we send to our AI model when we get it to provide a helpful answer and actually make use of the object storage and the vector storage that we've set up here. So we'll just send a simple prompt and tell it to do that. And then we'll return a simple answer with just the text that the model responded with. So that way we're not getting a bunch of random metadata or other logs, and we'll just get the actual response when we're sending queries and actually trying to learn more about the Agentuity platform with our LLMs.txt file. Okay, so all of that's done, and we finally walked through all the code. So let's go ahead and actually try this out and see just how it works. So we'll head over to the dev mode, and like I said, we'll go ahead and attach a file, in this case our LLMs.txt, and we'll just click run, which is going to store that in our object storage, and then create those vectors in our vector storage. Great, so we got that working, and we can see that everything worked successfully, and we get this new file with this new key set up in our docs object storage bucket. And like I mentioned before, we get a public URL whenever you store something in the object storage, which is really useful if you want to send this to other people or have that URL to share. So in this case, since we uploaded a file, if we were to try and open this, it would allow us to actually download the LLMs.txt file. So if we did that, we can open that up, and we'll see that that's the same LLMs.txt that we had before. So that just gives you a really nice way to share and store your object storage data and be able to use that publicly. And so if we look at the rest of the response the agent gave, we can see that we have a new collection within our vector storage called docs chunks, and it has all 4 of those vectors from our sections in the LLMs.txt file. So before we start asking questions to this agent, let's see if this actually worked and it stored some data. So let's head over to the infrastructure, and we'll start at the object storage. And we can see that we created a new object storage, and it's the right size based on our LLMs.txt. And you can't see a preview with object storage just yet, so I would recommend using key value storage if you have stuff that you want to preview in the UI. But you can see that everything is set up, and we got the uploaded file saved directly to our object storage, and we can use this across different sessions and interactions with our agent. Now if we take a look at vector storage, you'll see that we have this docs chunk database, and it's got all the different sections set up with the content. We can also preview the document itself, and then we can see the embeddings that we automatically create for you to power semantic searches. Okay, so final step is going to be to actually ask our agent some questions and see if we can get a new key value storage with all of our query history. So let's go ahead and do that in the dev mode. So if we come back to dev mode and we ask what is Agentuity, we'll see that we get a nice response here. And the really neat thing is, because we set it up to provide content from the top 2 most relevant vectors, we'll get information from the top of our LLMs.txt file, which is just basically introducing what Agentuity is. But we'll also get some information from the other relevant section, which is actually all the way down here in the About section, where we talk about how we were founded and what our vision is. So that's a really cool way to get context from across different sections of a file, even though we created separate sections. So let's go ahead and ask a few more questions just to make sure that we're actually logging all these different queries. So we'll ask about the AI gateway, and we'll see that the agent responded with the correct information, and it tells us that the AI gateway is a really great way to avoid handling a bunch of different API keys from model providers and just use a single interface. So we'll just ask one more question to test things out. We'll ask if there's any blogs covering agent-to-agent communication, since our LLM file had some information about the different blog posts that we have on our website. So let's go ahead and run that. And you can see that we got a really nice response with the relevant information from 2 of our recent blog posts on how to use agent-to-agent communication. And lastly, let's just go ahead and check to see if this agent was able to create a key value store and track our user query history. And you can see that we have a new user query history, so we'll go ahead and open that up. And just like we hoped, we have all of the different queries that we just sent. So we sent what is Agentuity, as well as what is the AI gateway, and then the question about blog posts with the timestamps and the top result for the different section or the relevant section that was used in order to actually send that information back. Okay, so taking a step back, this was a bit of a longer tutorial, but hopefully it gave you a really good idea about how to use the different storage types that we offer and why you might want to use them in the first place. So I hope you found this tutorial useful, and let me know how it goes if you're following along at home or trying to recreate something similar for your own use case. And I'd love to get your input and thoughts on what types of tutorials you'd like me to cover next. So if there's anything that you feel could use a tutorial, or you just want to learn more about the platform and are curious about certain features, feel free to reach out to us on our Discord or just leave a comment on this video, and we'll be sure to create a demo and help you learn more about Agentuity. Thanks so much for walking through this demo with me, and I hope you have a great day.